Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I love seeing amazing entrepreneurs coming up with incredible solutions that serve people. And I'll tell you what, we always throw around so many different words in entrepreneurial circles, such as data and decision-making and strategy. And that's why I'm very excited for the problem solver and incredible entrepreneur that we're being joined by in today's episode, because you're all going to love him. I know he's going to make all of us think about our data and our decision making in so many different ways. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Bobby Thompson. Bobby is the founder of WUNN Labs, where he's building the infrastructure for better human judgment in an AI-driven world. A former chief product and technology officer and board member in the transportation tech industry, Bobby has spent his career at the intersection of data, design, and decision making. His work now focuses on building systems that think with context, tools that listen like humans, reason like operators, and act with the clarity of experience. That's a high bar, and Bobby is very much doing that in incredible ways, in ways that serve all of us in our own businesses. So this is going to be an eye-opening one. I'm excited for all of us to learn from him today, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Bobby Thompson. All right, Bobby, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Heck yes. I teased listeners just a little bit about your background and the solution that you brought to the marketplace. I love the work that you're doing. I'm actually going to tease this before I kick it back over to you, but I love when entrepreneurs are so able to succinctly articulate what it is that they do. And I saw this snippet about WUNN Labs. We help business leaders make better, faster decisions from the data they already have. So this is going to be a fun conversation, Bobby, but let's start with you personally. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Bobby? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, hi. I started my career as a data scientist. My college career and background was basically studying how we can use data to move business or decisions or ideas forward. And I actually, after a few years of that, I kind of got, I'd say, disillusioned with it. I stepped out because I felt like the middle market was sort of unable to tap into the value. It was too long, too big of cycles. Science and research was too expensive for most companies to go through the process. Data was actually smaller than people thought. It was messier than they thought. And so many like data science projects, I think in the 2010s, sort of fell short. And so I kind of moved into actually building software products that were sort of closer to just real-time decision-making. I got into tech and sort of the marketing lead generation space, which is where the technology is actually kind of making decisions on the fly and trying to market and serve the right ads in front of people. And what really kind of led me down this path with WUNN Labs is I kind of observed two important things in the past few years. And the first one is that the change or the need for change in business has continued to accelerate over the last 30 years. And I think that's kind of undeniable, especially with the changes with AI. And I don't think we have kept up the studying of data inside companies, which means if you're making more changes, it means you're making more decisions with really less information per decision. And so my thought process was that's not good, right? And if we keep accelerating faster without better decisions, we're just going to kind of end up in weird places as businesses. The second thing is that I felt like AI sort of opened up an opportunity to solve a lot of the problems I saw in data science back in the 2010s. And really, the first one is I don't think you need as much data as you used to. You can tap into a lot of data sets you already have, like your emails or phone calls, conversations with your customers. If you do recordings on Google Meets or Zooms or whatever, there's a lot of information there to tap into to study that LLMs can extract information out of now. That solves one of the big problems. Another big problem is it's way easier to move fast through messy data. It's easier to join data when you have kind of a little, the AI is a little brain helping you merge things together. And so, there's a lot of stuff we could talk about, but I think that the combination of better access to study the data and better need to study the data made me feel like we need sort of a rethink of data decision-making inside business. And that's what I'm setting out to do with WUNN Labs.
Yeah, I really appreciate that overview, Bobby, especially because I'll be honest, I've been very excited to talk data with you here today. But most frequently in entrepreneurial conversations, when people say the word data, a lot of our minds jump straight to quantitative data. And I love the fact that you've already kicked this conversation off by saying it's not all quantitative, there's also qualitative data. You already listed emails. And I'll be honest with you, Bobby, one way that we feel inundated behind the scenes at this show with data is now all of a sudden, it's been a really cool past 2 years because every single episode we've ever done, it's all transcribed and it's all sitting in a Google Drive. And so there's all of this world-class entrepreneurial business content that, Bobby, if I could get this stuff organized in a right way and make sense of it all, I probably don't need to ever think about writing business content again for LinkedIn and for my website and for marketing and all of those things. So I'd love for you to talk to us about the types of data that you pay attention to, knowing that there's both quantitative and qualitative and there's value in all of that.
Yeah, your business is really interesting because I think 10 years ago, people would have said, you probably don't have a lot of data, right? And now I would say you have an enormous amount of data. You have recordings of tons of episodes. Now, there probably could be an interesting project to scan the transcripts and figure out what's the most common patterns between, episodes that get lots of listens and lots of shares. I'd be interested to find out what comes out of that. But so I think one of the best angles to talk about it often in business is sales, because if people are going to go, undertake a new effort, sales is the easiest one to determine whether they got a return on it, right? Did we increase sales or did we not increase sales? And so, a good kind of way to think about it, I think, is if you step through a few parts of the sales process in a B2B business, for example, are you contacting all the right people? Or the right companies? You may feel active and your team's doing a lot, but if 20% of the companies you're contacting, based on data that we can extract from patterns or look to enrich data with third-party information, you might find out 20% of the people you're talking to were really never going to be customers, or at least not high-paying ones. And that might mean that you just have this kind of bucket of 20% of your efforts that are really kind of going nowhere. And if you could remove that, then you could increase your sales by 20%. And we could kind of go down the line, but I think your question was more specifically what types of data. So how do you answer that? I think it's that's a good one to look at emails related to customers. It's a look at your data in your CRM where stuff's tracking. That's the very quantitative information. There's the qualitative information about sort of like, I guess maybe you can make it quantitative, but you start looking at personas and you try to extract the way people talk on calls. So you may use LLMs to turn it into quantitative stuff, but it comes out of sort of fuzzy, messy, conversational, disorganized data, right? And then you can start looking at combining in third-party data where you figure out types of companies, sizes of companies, where they fit in the industries, real estate data to figure out how big their business is or how many loading docks they have. It depends on what kind of your business is. And so you kind of have to throw that all into this soup of information, and you try to come out and say, how can we make our team 20% more effective by just focusing on the same people but doing the same things we're doing today? And so I hope that answers your question, but there's all sorts of other angles to that, right? Are you calling it the right times of the day? Are you calling the right people at the right times of the day? And if you could find a way to shuffle that around and get another 20%, you can squeeze more out. So that's sort of the process and the approach and the objective.
Yeah, but Bobby, I feel like that reveals part of your superpower is that you are that bridge between data and also business and strategic insights, actionable insights that we can actually use. And so I want to call this out that we've all heard anytime anyone talks about AI is that it's only ever going to be as good as we prompt it. And so if I'm prompting AI with nonsense, I'm going to get nonsense out. And here's a real tangible example is that lately, I obviously interview entrepreneurs for a living, and recently I interviewed somebody who was talking about internal culture. And I thought to myself, because obviously we have so many transcripts, and I think to myself, how cool would it be to take all of our internal team meeting transcripts? How cool would it be to copy and paste our internal team Slack communications, feed it to AI, and get an objective third-party view into what our culture actually looks like? Now, Bobby, I only came up with that idea because I talked to someone who focuses on culture. And I thought to myself, how can I do that? It seems to me like you naturally do that with all business data. So my question to you is, for listeners who are saying, well, Bobby, you clearly see more data than I even realize in my business. And on top of that, you think about ways that it would be valuable. when we have all of this data, how can we proactively initiate, or I guess I'll just use the AI term, how can we prompt it to get us this valuable data? Because I feel like, cool, I have a lot of data, I don't even know what to do with it.
Don't even know what to ask it, right? Oh boy, that's interesting. I love that culture example. I hadn't thought of that, but we could talk about that more in a second, because I think that ties into sort of my thesis on the change of business, right? And if you have to make more change, you might need to study your culture better to figure out how you can make more change. How do you prompt it, right? I think that you still need, in 2025 and going into 2026, you still need people that understand the data analysis that is going to be run to be able to ask the right questions. I think it's similar to software developers are probably the best at prompting to make software, right? You can get there and you can test it out if you're not a software developer, but the software developers have such a leg up in sort of understanding the right angles and things to ask. If I were to try and do a data study and I wanted to make sure that I was not having confounding variables really answer the question, I would know to ask for that and think of that, but somebody else might not know to kind of remove that from the equation, and you kind of get the garbage in to the prompt, garbage in with the data, garbage out with the analysis. So I still think that there's a place for the people that have done the data science, but what you mentioned that is interesting is what I'm kind of I believe is one of the big changes in data science now, is that people that have the data understanding and the business understanding can create a shorter bridge between that analysis than the past. And it's not a 6-8 month cycle with a business analyst, a data scientist, a data engineer, and then by the time it runs up to the business team, they're like, this missed the mark, or we tried that 2 years ago. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thinking about that, Bobby, my mind is running with possibilities hearing you talk about this. So one thing that really excites me about what you're doing with WUNN Labs is that it is taking all of that and leading to those faster decisions. And what I appreciate about faster decisions is the decision part. We all know that we want to be making better, more informed decisions in business, but I love that you so intentionally, you put faster in there for a reason. Speed matters in business. And so a lot of us, you and I are talking here towards the tail end of Q4 2025, and a lot of us, when tax season comes, we have to go back in time and get all of our data from the past year in our books, and we have to make sense of all of that. What does it look like to have faster decision making in real time as we're going forward, as we are week to week working on getting new clients, as we are week to week increasing, or ideally increasing, our client satisfaction? What does that speed component of what you've built look like?
Yeah, so I think if you could think about everything you're doing in business and compress it, Elon talks about, write out your 3-year vision and then try and do it in 6 months. And you might not get it done in 6 months, but you'll get it done faster than in 3 years. I think that the ability to move faster sort of just calls for the need to shorten cycles of innovation and shorten cycles of change management and shorten cycles of movement. And the problem is, without better decisions, you're just kind of doing things randomly. And I think we've seen a lot of that with companies that just launch AI initiatives, right? Oh, we have to do AI. And it's like, well, what are we doing? And where are we heading? And what are we going towards? And so I think what it looks like, if you do it right, is just a really well-oiled machine that moves quickly. And it looks like a business of before, but your cycles are now, months instead of years, or weeks instead of months. Maybe you hit deadlines faster, but they're real deadlines. You've completed the thing, you've instituted it, you've moved on. Right?
Along those lines, Bobby, I mean, there's so many different ways for us. I don't know. I almost said one of the weirdest phrases in all of English. There's so many different ways to skin a cat. I don't know where that originates from, but in that spirit, let's go there, because we live in a world today where there's so many different AI tools popping up in a million different ways. I mean, I think about, for example, one thing we recently learned internally, Bobby, is that sometimes we have really long team meetings. We'll have a 3-hour meeting, and we were feeding those transcripts into ChatGPT, and it wasn't doing what we thought it would do. So finally, I decided to ask it, what's the last thing you can see in the transcript? The context window wasn't big enough. It couldn't see the entire thing. And so we've been playing around. Is Gemini the solution here? Are other tools solutions here? We live in a world where, for us as business owners, it's so hard to understand the limitations, so hard to understand why and when we should turn to different AI tools. Obviously, you've analyzed the AI landscape and identified, hey, this is the gap that WUNN Labs is going to fill. What does it look like in a world where there are so many different AI tools popping up every week?
It looks like chaos. What you actually asked the question before was, what does moving faster with better decisions look like? And I feel like it just looks good. And when you're in a world where people are making faster decisions without better information and they're kind of going over, it feels like chaos, right? And it's sort of it may be easier to understand when you look at the opposite. How do you figure out what tools to do to answer these questions? And actually, a lot of why I started what I did is I got asked all the time, with all this AI stuff, what should we do, right? Or how should we use AI to move our business forward? And I think that it's a little bit of a backwards question. It's like the bigger question should be, what are your biggest problems that you're actually trying to solve, or what are your biggest needs, or what are the biggest levers you could pull? And then it's just, is there an AI tool or a way to use AI to solve that thing specifically? And sometimes you'll hit barriers and you go, okay, for your example, we uploaded the entire transcript. It's way too big. I can't get anything out of it. And so then it just becomes this kind of, it's a new skill everybody's learning. So what do we do with that information? Well, we can break it into chunks and extract it into smaller things and then kind of piece it back together. I mean, that's how I would attack that problem, but that's not something anybody knew how to do 5 years ago because it didn't exist, right? And so we all just kind of are learning on the fly. And I think that one of the cool things is if you have a very specific need, we're trying to solve this problem, there are often tools out there that are solving that exact problem. But if you're trying to just throw it into ChatGPT, it might be now you have to solve that problem.
Yeah, really well said. And you're right. I mean, that is actually crazy to think 5 years ago, you and I couldn't have this conversation publicly. It wouldn't pertain to anybody except obviously people working in AI behind the scenes. With that in mind, my one complaint about podcasting as a platform is that it's not visual. Well, I wish it was visual because I wish I could share my screen right now, but obviously the vast majority of listeners are just listening to us at the moment. But I've got up your tool that you've built. And to me, it's so exciting because I imagine if you and I were sitting in a coffee shop, you probably would, because it seems like you enjoy this. You probably would be like, Brian, let's just start dumping data in. Like, let's start making sense of this. Let's start solving problems. That said, introduce us to what your tool does and how it looks and how it works, because I can see like real life customer lifetime value is fed into this, and it has critical findings. It's got an executive summary. It has a too long didn't read section. It's making sense of a bunch of CSV files, of workbooks, of so many different things. So Bobby, you can introduce this better to listeners than anyone else in the world. So talk to us about what you've built.
Yeah. So what I've built allows data science people with business understanding to take your company's data kind of soup to nuts from where it's sitting to actually helping you make decisions. And what that looks like is there's a kind of a data collection piece, right? You might have data sitting in your CRM you have to get out. There's a data sort of merging up piece where you've got different company names and different systems or whatever, you've got to pull that together. There's a data enrichment piece, right? Maybe if you have companies, we want to go attach third-party data about, I mentioned before, but real estate information or company NAICS codes or whatever to look for patterns. And then there's an extraction piece or an augmentation piece where you are taking call transcripts or meeting transcripts or emails, and you say, how can we actually extract information out of this that can be processed using LLMs? And so you kind of pull all that together, and then the AI agents working with a person on my team can start studying that data, and the output are these reports that kind of focus on what are the actions that you should take from this information? Like, what are the key decisions that we learned from that you could actually do something with? And then we step through from there, and there's you have it pulled up here, and I can't explain it great, but it's the whole backstory as to why, right? And so people aren't gonna make decisions just because a thing told them to, or my team told them to, but it's supplying all the information along there. And the other thing I do is I provide Excel spreadsheets that provide sort of like bones of the data, because most people and most business leaders, when they want to make a decision, they want to feel it, right? And so, okay, you get a recommendation, you get a whole report that's a backstory. It's not just a dashboard, it's not a chart, it's all the context that lives with what you're doing. And then you also get some raw data related to it that you can poke around and feel and kind of think with.
Hearing you talk about these things, Bobby, I'm about to get real greedy with you while we're on the air together, because the way that you view data and the way that you combine it with technology, but also it's just so clear to me in my conversation with you how much you get business. And it's so clear to me how much you tie that to strategic decision making. And so with that in mind, I think what really excites me about what I hope is the next wave of AI is real-time AI. And I'm picturing a world, because now you're in my head, I'm starting to organize my data already, just hearing the way that you're talking. And I'm just like, how cool would it be to give WUNN Labs or any sort of program that can do this, all of my emails, all of my sales call transcripts, all of my proposals that I've sent out, and then of course my revenue numbers so that it can see what turned into sales and the lag times in between. How cool is that world going to look like when I hang up from a sales call and real-time AI says, Brian, that one should close. Here's your path from today of how and when that's going to close. Here's the emails, the follow-up emails, versus there are times, and AI could probably recognize these patterns a lot better than I can as a human, and versus those times where it says, hey, that call probably going to turn into a 6-month sales cycle. Here's what we recommend for a follow-up path. Bobby, this is my dream of the future. How far away are we from that being reality?
I think we're there. The problem is I don't know that we're there where one like SaaS tool you find online can just be installed to do that, right? I think a business could have that sort of like configured for them. One of the things that I think is the next wave of sales and marketing is these kind of custom journeys or playbooks or like pathways that everybody goes on based on the information that's kind of being collected along the way. And some of it can be recommended to you, Brian. Some of it could be automated through marketing and outreach, right? And so it's how do you make the entire experience of somebody you're trying to sell to personalized, but mathematically intelligently personalized, right? But it was funny to talk about the real time. One of the dreams I've always had, and I've never had this in business, and I don't know if you watch The West Wing, but surely the president does with the chief of staff. But I always thought it'd be awesome to wake up in the morning where my printer had printed out like, here's the things we studied from yesterday. Here's what you should do. And so that's I think the dream. It's like I looked at everything, I crunched every number, and here's your morning report.
Bobby, we can do that for you, man. We just got to find you a good chief of staff. You're right. That is life goals.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Along those lines, let's talk about behind the scenes for you, because I'm so fascinated not only by what you've built, not only the way that your mind works, but I also love bringing people on the air who are doing such cool things. But you're also one of us. You're a fellow entrepreneur. So behind the scenes, I would imagine, as much as you've got my mind going during our conversation today, where does your entrepreneurial mind go? Because you're not just a builder. You're not just someone who understands the tech. You're also running and growing your own business. So what does that side of your day-to-day look like? What are the things that you're focusing on there?
I think my background in software and data science makes sort of my day-to-day, like my brain's always kind of focused on making something and building something and solving a problem. And I think what I kind of have to do on a day-to-day basis is push back against that, because that's not always the thing to do every day, right? Sometimes you have to get on a podcast, right? Sometimes you have to do other things that aren't really what I wake up thinking about, or when I'm, on a run or something like that. It's just like the things I love to do, right? I grew up a builder, and so I kind of think about building stuff, right? And so the big thing for me is to kind of round out my day and round out my week and make sure you cover all the bases. I don't know if you saw this thing going on this week with Shohei Ohtani. He had his like grid of what he built out to become the best baseball player ever years ago. But it's like this grid where you put a dot in the middle of what you want to be, and then you have 8 around it, and then how do I complete each of those 8? You put 8 around it, and I think it's kind of like the role of an entrepreneur, especially if you're kind of starting the business yourself, is you have to cover all the bases, and you have to make sure you're checking off all the boxes. And some of the things won't always feel like the fire's burning there today, but you got to move it forward.
Yeah, so well said. And I think the Shohei Ohtani example, I think, is very timely because it came out during the World Series, like his long-term plan that apparently he made when he was like 10 years old or something crazy, where he said, by this age, I want to be a pitcher in Japan. By this age, I want to go to the MLB. He even had, here's where I'm going to get married. Does that mean that he stuck to that plan by year? No, but to your point about the Elon Musk example is that, hey, when you aim really high and you condense it, even if you miss the mark, gosh, you're going to be so much further ahead than people who don't have that level of intentionality and strategy behind them. So really appreciate those insights. And Bobby, I also know that listeners are probably screaming at the speakers right now saying, Brian, ask Bobby about how he uses AI, because clearly you're using it in so many different cool ways. What does it look like? Not even just within the data realm, but even on a personal and an entrepreneurial level, what are some cool ways you're tapping into the powers?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've changed, right? We've all kind of learned with it. I would say I used to ask it a lot more questions about things I was thinking, and kind of using it as like a sounding board. I started doing a little less of that because I felt like so much of like writing is thinking. And so what I try to do more of is formulate my entire thought as well as I can, and then sort of ask it for like updates or suggestions or, or feedback on any kind of approach I'm taking, more like maybe grammatically or where things didn't make sense or like obvious holes, right? So that's sort of a big piece where I tried to step away from just bouncing everything off of it, because it kind of, I think you kind of forget to think the way we used to think, right? I use it to build software. I use it to study data. I use it to spell check. I think then I use it for some fun things. Make it, images with the kids, print things out for them to color in.
I love that. My niece and nephew are 8-year-old twins, and you're right. That's like the guaranteed hit. If you want to entertain kids for a few hours, just fire up Midjourney. You're good to go.
Yep. Free print sheets, right?
It's so true. I love that. Bobby, I almost hesitate to ask you this question while we're on the air, because I don't believe anybody knows the answer to what I'm about to ask you, but I do believe that you'll have really interesting insights here. Looking forward a year or 2 years, it's so hard to predict the future, but things are changing incredibly fast. I personally, I'm a sucker for any Apple product, and so I'm an early adopter to Apple Vision Pro. Hasn't quite taken off, but I feel like there is this next frontier of hardware, for example. But from your perspective, because you touch the software side, you touch the data side, you touch the tactical business side of things, what's your view on where we're going in this AI world these days?
So I think kind of two different things. I think that the first one is, I think there's going to be some sort of breakthrough in how we interact with it from like a product perspective that I haven't thought of, you haven't thought of. Maybe somebody's already launched it and we just haven't like heard much about it, right? It's still so early in like how we're trying to get humans to talk with these things or integrate with these things, and I think someone's gonna come up with something better than chat, right? Or more integrated than chat. And I think a lot of kind of the sidecar Copilot products are kind of interesting, or maybe it's valuable or whatever. So I think that someone's going to have a breakthrough there. I don't know who it is, and I don't know what it's going to be. It might be a hardware device. It might be an update to how we, interact with it in software and that sort of thing. The next thing I think is that it's going to become cheaper. Like I think I saw Altman posting about this recently, but the cost of intelligence from the AI is going to come down, right? And so there's going to be things that we can do in 2 years that just would be cost prohibitive today. And so I think that's really the big change from kind of the raw AI models in the next couple of years. I might be wrong. There might be some giant scientific breakthrough that, we end up in singularity in 2 years. But outside that, I think it's mostly going to be cost coming down on sort of the unit of intelligence.
Yeah, really well said. And I think that paints a picture of a very hopeful future, which I'm absolutely joining you there. And you've mentioned this a few times in our conversation today, so I want to go back to it because I think that your voice is powerful in this domain. And it sounds to me like when you picture that hopeful view of tomorrow, you don't picture it, I mean, in the context of what you're doing. It certainly doesn't replace data scientists, because data scientists make this work way more meaningful and way more powerful. You talk about it as a software developer. Vibe coding is actually helping you do your job, and you're way better. Speaking of, you and I have both talked a little bit and joked about AI art. Gosh, I have no art degree in my background. I'm sure someone who majored in art can make way better things inside of Midjourney than I can, because they actually know what they're prompting. They actually know what art styles look like. So, Bobby, for the people who are freaking out, and obviously mainstream media certainly loves to pile on in this argument, what is your view of the future of work as well, to go in tandem with these thoughts you're sharing?
I think the biggest change is going to be that teams are going to be smaller. I don't believe that we're going to just not have jobs and replace all the people with jobs. But I do think you're not going to need as many kind of monolithic companies, which I actually think is cool, especially for a podcast about entrepreneurship. I think there's going to be a lot like a big boom of smaller companies. And I think that that's going to be really powerful. You can get a ton done with 10 people now that would have been a lot harder years ago. So I think that's the biggest change from the kind of the work standpoint. I think that the one kind of piece that's the most scary, if you wanted to be scared, is how do young people that haven't spent 10 years building software, for example, kind of learn those skills so that then they can be, as good at prompting, or whether it's software marketing or data science or art, right? And so how do you kind of learn those raw skills, without the crutch of AI, so that you are then better with it? And I think that it's doable, right? I mean, you could still just go sit down and read the old textbooks and study stuff, but I think people are going to have to kind of figure that piece out. And maybe it just requires a lot more people to go kind of deep in research on the topic that they want to do for their career. And maybe it changes in education. I'm not quite sure the answer there, but I think that's the one kind of open question I have.
Yeah, so well said. I think about it most directly with regards to writing, because all of my friends who have kids, I love asking their kids, how are you getting your homework done? And they all just say ChatGPT. Like, that's the way that they're doing it. Bobby, you and I once upon a time had to write our school essays. We had to actually come up with the outline. We had to actually we had to do the research, and then we had to summarize all of that and make it digestible. And that's something that, you're right. If you never do that exercise, you never get those reps. How the heck are you going to do that? And then I just want to echo that point that you made about teams can be smaller and there's going to be more teams. It doesn't mean that we're going to eliminate. It just means different people can work on different things. You and I, in the course of this conversation, we've probably given 6 different business ideas if somebody wants to run with them. And I've always been fascinated by that metric of how many employees it takes to make $1 million in revenue. A few decades ago, that number was like 14 people to make $1 million in revenue. Gosh, one person can make $1 million in revenue these days. So crazy. Absolutely love that. Anything you wanted to add there, Bobby?
You mentioned the writing. My wife's a teacher, and is the high school teacher, going through the same kind of questions. And it's hard because writing's thinking, reading's thinking, and so much of that is just so important for how you kind of learn to develop. It's really kind of. I think people still need to learn those raw skills. Even if you ultimately then just prompt the AI to do it. I don't think it's a problem using the AI. I think you just have to kind of learn what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so well said. Well, Bobby, I knew that time would fly by with you today. We're going to have to get you on the air again because this is so fascinating, the work that you're doing and the ramifications, the positive impacts of what it is that you've built. So I'm really excited to closely follow your success. But before we tease your links, I have to ask you, what is your biggest piece of advice for listeners? We got into the strategic today. We got into the tactical. I know that you also love the mindset stuff behind all of this as well. So knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, and also knowing that you are one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
It's the golden era for ambition. Be ambitious. You can do so much more than you could before, and so the people that try and are resourceful and ambitious, they're gonna have a lot of success. So that's it.
Ooh, the golden era of being ambitious. The golden era of ambition. I love that. 1,300 plus episodes, Bobby. You're the first one to drop that term on here. So certainly I'm gonna earmark that one to you. It's always gonna be credited to you. But Bobby, heck yeah. In all seriousness, I'm very excited. Honestly, I'm chomping at the bit. I want to do something with you in some cool way because it seems like you enjoy this stuff, and tying it to a really cool business strategy that we can make decisions on, that we can act on, that we can grow with, so that we can serve more people. And I know that a lot of listeners are going to say, okay, Brian, stop talking. I want to use Bobby's tool. Bobby, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, WUNNLabs.com. One is WUNN. So WUNN Labs.com.
Super easy. And on top of that, we're dropping that link directly down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. We're also linking to Bobby's personal LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to him, continue the conversation. You see how much he loves this stuff. And I'm sure there's probably a ton of Bobby Thompsons on LinkedIn. So you'll find the one and only down below in the show notes. Yes, for sure. Well, Bobby, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.